Welcome to Blue Talks.
All right. Thank you very much, Corey. I am thrilled to be speaking at the University of Miami today. Thank you very much for having me. This topic is one of my favorite topics to speak on, how to embrace your feminine energy to be a better negotiator. And the first thing I want to say on that is that it does not mean be more like a woman, right? We all have a mix of feminine and masculine energy. I myself have a lot of masculine energy. I had to decondition myself in some ways and learn how to use my feminine energy in the ways we're going to be talking about today. So that's the first thing I want to make clear, is that anybody of any gender can use these skills and the concepts we're going to be talking about today. When we think of masculine energy, we think of that doing energy, that achieving energy, that intent on advancement. It's a push-pull energy. It's a pushing forward. We think of a very persuasive energy and an active energy. And when we think of feminine energy, that is more like an energy of feeling, of intuition. Our decision-making under feminine energy is informed more by what we intuit is the right thing to do, or what we feel about a situation, rather than weighing pros and cons or using logic or rationality strictly to make decisions. So that's what we're talking about today. This topic is a bit counterintuitive, because when we think of what makes a good negotiator, we tend to think of masculine energy, manly, power-seeking, this push-pull, this moving forward, this persuasive energy, maybe testing boundaries, things like this, getting our way. But that's not the only energy that makes us good negotiators. So we're going to really challenge these stereotypes today. And when we talk about negotiation, I want to make clear that we're talking about negotiation in a professional setting. I'm a corporate attorney by day, so in the corporate professional setting, but we're also talking basically about any high stakes conversation. And that could be in a professional setting, but also in a personal setting, including with our kids. I'm a parenting expert, and a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today, which is geared toward professionals, these skills are pretty much directly transferable to any high stakes personal conversation, even with our kids. So we're really going to challenge a lot of those stereotypes. I want to point out that Chris Voss, who is the author of Never Split the Difference, he's a former FBI hostage negotiator, and an expert in negotiation skills. He indicated on an interview that a woman who is a good negotiator is, quote, almost unstoppable. That women, feminine energy, that women are naturally good at the skills we're going to be talking about today. And that women are conditioned not to think of themselves as good negotiators, because as we mentioned, when we think of what makes a skilled negotiator, we think of somebody who's very masculine. So we're going to challenge all that today. And I want to also point out that we're going to talk about skills, two main areas specifically, where you can use these skills to have a productive negotiation. And when I say productive, I mean a negotiation where both parties, whether it's personal or professional, have a mutually beneficial outcome, or at least an outcome that they are okay with and that they can live with. So that's what we're talking about. So when we talk about these two main skills, and if we have time, we're going to get to a bonus skill, more of a fun one that I like to talk about. I want us to keep two things in mind. I want us to think about first as the negotiation is an opportunity to connect with the other party. It's not about getting what we want or getting the other person to see our way or persuading them. It's an opportunity to connect. Even if it's a person we don't know well or at all, we can still think of it that way. So it's an opportunity to strengthen the relationship, strengthen the connection. And secondly, I want you to think about negotiation in terms of drawing the other party to you, not persuading the other party, not pushing them, not testing boundaries. You are drawing, magnetizing them to you. So I want you to keep those in mind as we talk about these two main areas. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is, this is a great feminine energy quality. It is getting comfortable with silence. Now, I've noticed that Americans in general, myself included, we're not always comfortable with silence. We seek to fill the silence. It's a little bit awkward, whether it's a personal or professional conversation, okay? So I'm asking you to get comfortable with that silence and not necessarily fill it right away with words. Because when we're not comfortable and we try to fill that silence, we tend to over-explain. And there's a lot of problems that come with that dynamic. So what is over-explaining? Over-explaining is largely a defensive mechanism. Could be rooted in childhood. It definitely was with me because I had parents who were inherently mistrustful. So us kids felt like we always had to defend ourselves and explain ourselves. Can be rooted in childhood. It could be due to a bunch of things. But it can be a defensive mechanism where you feel like you constantly have to justify what you're saying, justify your position, okay? So whatever the cause for the over-explaining, in a negotiation, it has a lot of negatives. So first of all, to inform a little bit more about what over-explaining is, you can think of it in terms of you're giving the other party information they did not ask for, information they don't need, or you're talking to fill the space. I want you not to do that. I want you to get comfortable with that silence. Because the silence, as we'll see in a bit, that's where the magic happens in this type of exchange. So several negatives with over-explaining. Number one, you risk losing the other party because if you're giving them information, they're going to be overwhelmed. They're going to feel like you don't want to have an exchange with them. They're going to spend a lot of energy picking out the important, essential bits from the conversation that they need to know and disregarding all the extraneous stuff. So you risk losing them entirely. Okay, you risk overwhelming them. It's not a good dynamic. The other thing is that over-explaining like that, giving the party all this information and being very defensive, it projects insecurity and a lack of confidence. Even if that's not the case, even if you're secure about what you're talking about, it still presents that insecurity because the other person is thinking, well, this person doesn't feel secure or confident in their stance or what they're explaining. So obviously you don't want to do that. And the last thing is, when you over-explain and you are doing all the work and you are doing all the talking, you are robbing the other party of the chance to make an effort in the negotiation, to come forward and make an effort, and also to connect with you, and you are robbing the other party of having a stake in the game. If you're doing all the talking and you're doing all the work, the other party is not making as much of an effort and feels like they don't have as much of a stake in the outcome. Okay, so for all those reasons, we want to avoid over-explaining. So how do you do that? How do you embrace the silence? You can think of it as a good guideline is, answer the question asked, like a good litigator. Only answer the question asked. Don't give information the other party did not ask for. That gives the other party the opportunity to ask follow-up questions, ask clarifying questions, and now you have a dialogue where you're both working and you're both making an effort, okay? You could also use the guideline answer in 1 to 2 sentences, okay, as long as the sentences are not too long, but those are kind of ideas you can start with, okay? So the second big thing I want to talk about stems from that first, is you're going to, and this is similar to active listening. If you're a parent, you've heard of active listening. It's when you kind of listen and restate what the other person is saying to communicate that you are hearing and seeing and understanding what the other person is saying, and it fosters connection. So this is similar to that. And this will work in a situation where you're asked a question, but also not necessarily where you're asked a question by the other party, where you are acknowledging what they're saying. And the technique is to use short, concise statements that are pressure-free and judgment-free. This works when the other party is making a declarative statement, or maybe when things are getting a little bit heated or emotionally charged. You want to remain calm. And you want to use statements like, I see you, or I see, depending on the level of relationship you have with the other party. I understand, I hear you, I see, things like that. So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this sounds too simple to work, but it does. If you put it into practice, you'll see that it's very effective. So this does several things. Everyone on the planet wants to feel seen, heard, understood. So you are conveying that you are listening to the other party. Now, this also works if your body language is consistent with all this. So we don't have time to go in detail on the body language, but it helps if you're making eye contact, your maybe shoulders are back, you're leaning forward toward the other party, showing them that you're listening. So this does several things. You're showing the other party that you are listening and hearing them. You are also doing this in a judgment-free, pressure-free way. Because what happens when you pressure someone is they naturally want to resist you. And that's not the energy we're going for here. You don't want them to be resisting you. You want to be drawing the other party to you. So when you make these statements, you are creating the dialogue, but you are also doing that in a way that shows no judgment. You are not agreeing or disagreeing, and you are also not pressuring them, okay? And it sounds too simple to work, but over time, and when you use these consistently, you will see that these are effective. So I want to give you a couple examples of these in action, and these are from parenting conversations, and you'll see that although these sound very, very simple, almost too easy to work, they do have merit. So the first example is, this is in the height of COVID, okay? We were all sedentary and doing distance learning and doing remote work, and we were home, right? And my son, I had told him, you're doing distance learning and you need to do some exercise, right? We need to keep staying active so we, to benefit our health and whatnot. We have to keep on a schedule, right? Even though we're home. Okay, so we were sitting watching a show and I told him, you need to do some exercise today. And he said, no, I don't want to do any exercise today. I worked out yesterday. I don't want to do anything. And I said, okay. And that is all I said. I said nothing else, okay? And the show we were watching ended. And he said, well, I want to do my own exercise. And I said, okay. And he said, well, I want to set a timer for 20 minutes and do my own workouts. And I said, fine, that sounds good. And that's what happened. And my point is, I said nothing. I didn't try to persuade him. I didn't try to give him all the reasons why he should do these things, right? I just kind of sat there, listened to him, embraced the silence. It was uncomfortable. I was frustrated, but I didn't act on those feelings. I just embraced the silence and it worked out. So that's one example. Another example is kind of the reverse, where my son asked me for something and I said no, and he shrugged and said, okay. And I was like, that's it. That doesn't make sense. You're not trying your usual, well, why can't this do this? And why not? And why not? And I thought that was easy. It can't have been that easy, right? But what happened is the reverse. What happened is, I was in the frame of mind where I actually reconsidered the no. And I said, well, I thought about it and maybe we can do it, but we can do it this way, right? So that's a reverse example of where he, didn't say anything. He just acknowledged my statement. And that brings up another set of skills we don't have time to get into today, but another set of skills I love to talk about, especially with parents, which is when you give the other party a chance to self-champion in a negotiation or a conversation, that also draws them into you. But that's another topic for another day. But anyway, that's what happened there. So I actually reconsidered my position and said, well, no, I think we can do it like that. So that's another example of using these skills in action. So the last thing I want to talk about is a fun thing and moms I find are really good at this in a professional and personal context, is injecting some humor in the negotiation. Now, there's a lot of caveats to this. You have to read the room, okay, depending how well you know the person, if it's a professional or personal setting. But this can work in a professional negotiation too. I recommend that you stick to family-friendly humor, and I recommend that you stick to humor that is obviously humorous. I have a very dry, sarcastic sense of humor that does not always translate well. Sometimes people don't understand if I'm joking or not, and people don't like to have to expend the energy trying to figure out if I'm joking or not. So I don't recommend you use that type of humor. I recommend you, if you use this, you make statements that are on their face humorous, right? So one example is in this book I read called 59 Seconds, where it can say something like, if you're in some kind of back and forth, you can say, well, okay, I can do this for 5,000, I guess, and I'll throw in my pet frog. Okay, it's obviously humorous, right? So the humor has many benefits. It is unexpected, and anything that happens that is unexpected, people sit up and pay attention to. So it's a good trick to remember. And the other thing is, laughter has a lot of physical benefits. Oxygenates the cells, oxygenates the brain, it relaxes somebody, it releases endorphins. Anytime you can put the other person in a place where they're comfortable like that is a good thing. I cannot tell you how many times I have used humor to kind of derail or de-escalate emotionally charged situations. So the next example I'm going to use is an example that my son used on me, which was hilarious. And not only does he have a great sense of humor, but he's a very quick thinker. We were having some conversation a couple of years ago. I don't remember the topic, but it was serious. So in the conversation, he said to me, "You need a hug? I'll Venmo you some hugs." Just like that. That was it. And it was a pattern interrupt, and I laughed, and it was a nice moment of connection. So something like that. Again, it seems too simple to work, but these concepts, when you put them into practice regularly, you will see you are much better able to draw the other party to you little by little. And that ability to connect with the other party is actually what makes somebody a skilled negotiator. It's not a boundary pusher, and it's not somebody who intimidates. It's not somebody who has a strong presence. I mean, sometimes that can be effective in different ways, but this is really what it's about. It's about finding a way to connect with that other party. So I hope you have found this information useful. I have really enjoyed sharing all this with you today, and thank you very much.